So to the extent that, it's terrible news because, somebody that has essentially an $18,000 deductible, which is the reality if you look at what they're paying in premiums. Somebody that has an $18,000 deductible that doesn't have $18,000 really doesn't have much access to care. That's the really bad news.
Welcome to the Power and Market Report. I'm Albert Liu. I'm happy to be joined once again by Dr. Keith Smith of the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. He's a board-certified anesthesiologist and since 2009 has run a practice with transparent pricing. He did something very bold in 2009. He published his prices for everyone to see online, and the results have been absolutely amazing. He's also the co-founder of the Free Market Medical Association, which is a nonpartisan association that provides resources, support, and education to the public about the role of free markets in medicine. Dr. Smith, it's great to see you again. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again, Albert.
Thanks for coming back on, Dr. Smith. You've been one of my most consistent and reliable guests over the years, and I think the first time I had you on, I was still trying to figure out which side of the microphone to speak in. So thank you very much for being such a great guest over all those years. I want to talk about an article that I dug up out of the Wall Street Journal. And I don't know if it was the last time we got together or the time before that. We were kind of having a chuckle because there was an article that the professors at Harvard University, if you remember, were very upset because they were being subjected to the same type of healthcare that they'd helped design for the rest of the country.
Yes.
That was a funny article. Unfortunately, this one is not quite as funny, but I think there is some good news coming out of it, and we'll discuss that going forward. But the topic is basically how the average cost of employer health care has exceeded $18,000 for a family in 2016. Based on my own personal experience, I think that number is right on.
Yeah, I think it is too. The good news is that everybody is basically self-insured as time goes forward. And so to the extent that, it's terrible news because, somebody that has essentially an $18,000 deductible, which is the reality if you look at what they're paying in premiums. Somebody that has an $18,000 deductible that doesn't have $18,000 really doesn't have much access to care. That's the really bad news. The really good news is that the market is doing what the market always does. It's responding. And in spite of the attempts of Leviathan to completely take over healthcare, they've actually created this consumer market because people that have this sort of personal exposure and sticker shock to the healthcare pricing currently, they're asking very pointed questions. How much is this procedure you're recommending going to cost? And they want to know up front, because it's coming out of their pocket. It's their money. So, once again, the really good news is the government never gets anything right. And so in their attempt to completely take over healthcare and line the pockets of the cronies, they've actually created a consumer market full of people, even those covered by these silly Obamacare plans, where the deductibles are higher than most of the prices we have listed on our website. So, it's not terribly surprising that is one of the fastest growing parts of our business. I told a group 2 days ago that the first patients that arrived when we put our prices online were Canadians, and they have coverage, but they just don't have much access to care. And people in the United States are finding that too, particularly these people covered by these so-called Obamacare plans. They have coverage, but they don't have much access, and they're discovering, as I'm telling more and more people, that the only single payer upon which they can truly rely is themselves. So the really good news is that the market is at work, and when the market's at work and there's competition and people with sticker shock demand pricing up front, that's very deflationary, and it makes the providers of the service deliver more value. So there's actually a very positive thing that is happening. But it's only because more and more of healthcare expense is coming out of people's pockets.
Yeah, maybe there's nothing better for consumers than government neglect. right? You can sort of explain the entire
Yeah,
economy of Hong Kong that way. Just
that's
come.
right. I've told people I'm not afraid of Washington putting me out of business. I'm afraid of somebody there showing up trying to help me.
Exactly. Um, Let me get into some of the data here, Dr. Smith. So it says, the article says that the annual premium cost rose 3% to 18,142. That's for an employer family plan in 2016. That's up from 17,545. This is the nonprofit Kaiser Family Foundation study. Employees are asked to pay 30% of the premiums. And so this is taking a big chunk out of people's take-home pay. The thing that actually, I guess, struck me the most was that it later says that economists expected these premiums to be rising even faster than they were. And it almost seems like they were disappointed that they weren't, and they can't figure it out.
Yeah, and employers are responding as they do. They're increasing the deductibles to keep their premium expense down because they're going up so fast. The problem with all of these economic models, and the problem with economic modeling in general, as you know better than I do, is that it's based on a false and static analysis many times, when the actuality is that pricing for many healthcare procedures in the United States and expensive healthcare procedures is actually falling because the market is at work. These skyrocketing premiums are really a reflection of the past, not of current or future risk. So I would say that this is very backward, not forward thinking, and it represents a real opportunity for some innovator or entrepreneur that figures this out. That if there's some non-price gouger that decides to enter the marketplace and honestly ascertain risk, then I think there's a real opportunity for a true insurer in the marketplace if the government will just get out of the way and let them work.
I think that's the key, though. But just finishing off this point, you're so right. The modeling is a problem. The article says that these confused economists, they're investigating possibilities like after effects of a recession or economic uncertainty, maybe regime uncertainty. But so often is the case that these economists, they focus on their macroeconomics, and they neglect just the actions of the individual actors, in this case people and companies looking to lower their costs, and then the market like you responding to that.
Yes. No, it's Obamacare has been a disaster for the country, but as I've said, they inadvertently and very paradoxically have contributed to a consumer market in healthcare, which is driving costs down for everyone in the country because people are spending their own money with these giant deductibles, and my guess is the deductibles are just going to continue to increase. I think that the wild increase that the folks at Harvard, who by the way gave us the Rosemary's Baby of healthcare pricing, which is the resource-based relative value scale, their prediction that this is going to go higher is probably actually true, even though it's unnecessary.
Regarding high deductible plans, it says that 29% of covered workers are now enrolled in high deductible plans. That's up from 24% last year and 20% the year before. And all of this was predicted in some form by you a couple years ago when you told me that this reform in healthcare was going to create, unwittingly, a free market for medicine that would operate below these thresholds, right?
It's actually very predictable. One point I'd like to make, the self-funded ERISA plans here in Oklahoma that are saving the most money based on engaging with free market providers like mine and other members of the Free Market Medical Association, the people that basically have followed our model all over the country, they're saving money by completely waiving deductibles and copays for various medical procedures and doing that in an attempt to achieve steerage to non-price gougers. So, in December, my favorite month to work now, in December, we will hear families who are who's breadwinner, is an employee of a self-funded ERISA plan, whose employer has told them, if you'll go to Surgery Center of Oklahoma, for instance, to have your cruciate ligament reconstructed, we will waive all of your out-of-pocket expense. And so these people tell us, we're having Christmas this year, because of your non-price gouging, activity. So very paradoxically, I think, in contrast to the the Kaiser study, very paradoxically, the folks who are really saving money in self-funded ERISA plans are those who are getting away from high deductible alternatives and keeping lower deductibles present so that they can achieve steerage to non-price gougers like me.
That's interesting. Now, is it the case that those instances still are so few that they don't register, or are they being ignored? What do you think is going on?
No, the industry is taking notice, so much so that our latest ERISA self-funded plan to sign up is all the employees of the state of Oklahoma. So it's 182,000 lives. It's the largest self-funded plan in the state. And the state plans in the United States every one are the largest self-funded plans in any state that you would go to. So all eyes are really on what's going on here in Oklahoma with this move, because they anticipate saving up to $200 million just in the first full year of implementation. So, surrounding states and the nation are not going to sit back idly and watch this experiment unfold. The results are already coming in, and the savings are just shocking.
Especially in this environment here where governments are struggling. Local governments are struggling, and it's going to get worse. And I saw an article about what's going on with the Dallas police and firemen's pension plan. I don't know if you saw that. Severely underfunded. Yes. Same situation in California with CalPERS. 2 sets of books, 2 different assumptions, and when it really comes down to it, they're underfunded. So I could see them looking at this. I want to ask you something about something you mentioned earlier, and that is opportunity for an entrepreneur to enter this insurance space. Now, there is no course on entrepreneurism. People just do it unless they're prevented from doing it. So there must be something preventing the type of business you're talking about operating, right? A real savvy free market insurance type of operation.
Yeah, and the answer is always the same. It's government. And the insurance regulations are there. Shouldn't be any surprise to any of your audience. The insurance regulations are there to prevent upstarts and competitors from entering the marketplace. There were various aspects of the Unaffordable Care Act intentionally designed to drive people out of the insurance business so that we were left with, just the big 3 or the big 4. And that's exactly what's happened. My friend Jim Epstein at Reason Magazine has told me that one of the features that he looks for when he's looking for a really interesting story where all kinds of nasty things are going on that aren't seen is industry consolidation. Right. Because that's not the natural order of things. The natural order of things is for me to notice that someone is doing something that I think I can do better, and for me to get in there and mix it up and challenge them and try to be successful myself. But when you see industry consolidation, that there's collusion, there's very likely a bribery of government officials, there's all kinds of nastiness going on.
I have a question for you, because at the end of this article, they try to get Obamacare off the hook. So they give us all this bad news, and then they say that there's limited effects from the Affordable Care Act on employers' health benefits. And one of the facts that it uses is that a lot of these increases started before the majority of the act took effect. And that's something that I observed myself as well. Can you explain this? Is it somehow connected, or was there something else going on? Why were premiums increasing at a pretty rapid rate even before this Affordable Care Act?
I'm not sure unless you want to look at the delayed implementation. I mean, they talk about boiling a frog. You don't put them in hot water to start with, and the implementation of this so-called law was very slow and was in pieces. And had I think that they inflicted the full measure of the Unaffordable Care Act the day it was passed on the industry, that we would have seen a very rapid rise in costs. The other thing is people weren't buying these plans. I mean, in the very beginning, people were skeptical and they weren't buying them. And now they are buying them. They're finding out that they're worthless, and the deductibles are so high they can buy their health care cheaper than they can use the benefit. So that, if you put yourself in the shoes of the insurance exec, all these people have these huge deductibles. That's a lot of insulation between you and a premium that, or in a claim you have to pay. So, to the extent that these are going up, but maybe slower than they thought, or that maybe this has slowed things down, all they've done, if it's slowed things down, is inhibit access to care. And that's a feature of any central planner, any scheme that folks come up with in government is rationing, and so that could also be part of the answer.
Okay, I've also seen recently in the news that providers are dropping out in certain states, insurers that is, are dropping out.
Yes.
Do you see that trend expanding, and what do you think the response is going to be to that? Are we just going to continue on with just a couple insurers in each state, or is the government going to step in and do something about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you could make a pretty compelling case for the fact that that was intended, and that to get to single or dual payer, you just have to create an environment where everybody except one or two is out of the marketplace. I've read many compelling arguments about this actually being the intention of the Unaffordable Care Act, was to really reduce the insurance industry to rubble. And then, of course, the government comes in, having done all that damage, to save the day with their solution. And that's classic. I mean, that's sort of how things typically unfold.
Right, the old break the leg and hand me a crutch deal.
Yes.
We've got a debate coming up next week, Dr. Smith. I'm wondering, from your opinion, as far as the way healthcare is delivered in this country, does it make any difference?
I don't know. I heard Peter Schiff interviewed the other day, and he was asked a similar question as pertains to the market. And he said, if you're going to vote, and he's not sure he recommends anyone vote, but if you're going to vote, through door number one, if you walk through that door, you know that you'll be killed. And door number two, if you walk through that door, you might not be killed. And so, as somebody who's going to play the odds, you would obviously select door number two. I don't know that there's any relationship between what candidates say and ultimately what they do. I like Mark Twain's comment. If voting mattered, they would not let us do it.
Right.
So, I don't know. Trump talks a lot about free markets in healthcare. I mean, he very rarely discusses healthcare without attaching the phrase "free market" to it. So at least he's giving it lip service. The other candidate, she who will not be named, is an absolute enemy of markets in all industry. So I don't know, if somebody were inclined to vote for the lesser of two evils, I think the choice is pretty clear.
That's interesting. You might not be killed, but depending on who you are, you might be tortured. You got to be careful about that one. Okay, let's go on to what you're doing at the Free Market Medical Association. I know that a lot of employers are struggling with this, and getting back to this survey, they looked at employers with 10 to 49 employees, and then looked at how many offered health benefits compared to before, and I think it was not too different. And is so typical, I guess, for people who are economists. They don't really think like economists. They don't think about, for example, the number of employers who were at 9 employees and didn't go to 10 because of this, or employers that were at 0 employees and couldn't go to 1 because of this. But I know this is a problem. And so tell us about some of the things you do to help companies navigate this complicated and expensive area.
Well, one of the most important aspects of the Free Market Medical Association, and one which we take very seriously, is helping employers understand the concept of disintermediation in healthcare and just identifying and eliminating all of the layers that exist between the willing buyer and willing seller of services, healthcare in particular. One of the problems is that one of the layers between the buyer and the seller oftentimes is motivated through the undisclosed payments and commissions that they receive many times from the carriers. So, the broker community has a lot of blood on their hands in preventing really innovative and entrepreneurial solutions reaching their ostensible client. So, the Free Market Medical Association it basically works like a Match.com where we connect buyers and sellers and reduce the presence of intermediaries to a real minimum. And it's worked beautifully. It's allowed employers to look directly at the seller and realize that a lot of people in the country that provide health service, physicians in particular, are not price gougers, but they've been represented otherwise for various reasons, either because that serves the interests of the government or the carrier or the big crony conglomerate corporate hospital. There's some real bad players out there that are making a lot of money. And what we've decided to do at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma is to actually pay the people who are doing the work. The surgeons here, they do very well because they're receiving the lion's share of the prices that you see on our website. And members of the Free Market Medical Association all over the country have followed this model where they've acknowledged that the real price gouging and inflation in healthcare belongs to is part of the institutional charge. It's primarily the hospitals that are the problem, and big pharma is a huge problem too. But the institutional charge is really where a lot of the money goes in healthcare, and it's completely unnecessary.
I'm wondering, because your part of your task then is making a market, are you having more trouble getting providers to sign on to this, or users to sign on to this?
The answer to that is easy. It's users. In the beginning, I worried that the supply of providers would be too limited for the demand. And it's clear now that the demand is huge, but most of the people that are on the demand side would rather complain than do anything about it. Part of the reason they do that, though, is that they have a broker or a consultant who's advising them, who's frankly conflicted because they're receiving these undisclosed overrides from the carriers to prevent them from venturing out and dealing directly with facilities like mine. So right now, I would say that the demand is huge, but the interest is smaller than it should be because of the misinformation and conflicts of interest that are present in the industry.
Interesting. Now let's talk from the demand side then. Say I'm just an employee, so I'm not a director or a CEO. I'm just a guy who wants high quality health care and not have 18,000 taken out of directly or indirectly my paycheck every year. Who within my organization is the best bet to start talking about these ideas with?
Probably the CFO is the person to talk to. The human resources people are typically battle weary folks who they're constantly afraid that anything that is done for the benefit of the community or for the company will be seen as detrimental to the employees. And they also are constantly on guard that any action they recommend that's beneficial to the employees is bad for the company's bottom line.
Right.
What we've discovered is, and so they just keep their head down and hope that as few bullets hit them as possible. This idea that we have is one of those ideas where it's great for both. The employees of self-funded plans, for instance, that we deal with, they have no out-of-pocket, and then the company plan pays a tenth of what it would at the so-called not-for-profit hospital across town. So everybody's a winner, but the HR folks, they're busy, and this is a lot of work for them, and they're battle weary. And the people who really are scratching their heads and seriously looking at this are are the CFOs of self-funded companies. I mean, they're the ones that typically, after I have a face-to-face interaction with the CFO, we see action. And they basically tell the human resources people, this is the direction that we want to go. And then it typically happens.
Is this an all or nothing decision, binary decision, Dr. Smith, or is this something that can be phased in?
It can be phased in, and it can also be tiered. There are some companies that decide they want to keep their administration of their plan with a big carrier, but then they'll bolt on this idea. So, the employee has a choice. You can go down this rabbit hole and have no out of pocket, or you can go down the traditional rabbit hole and pay your deductible and copay and go to the big hospital. So they're all variants of ways to get there. But there's money to be saved. It's shocking how much money is there to be saved. A typical 1,500 employee company is going to save about $2.5 million in their first year if all they do is implement a program that is for outpatient surgery at a non-price gouger. That's not even considering inpatient care or any of the other possibilities that are out there waiting for them.
Yeah, and I guess people who haven't heard you before or heard you on my show might not realize that a lot of times these are the exact same surgeons doing the exact same procedures as in the regular hospital at these private surgery centers, correct?
Oh yeah, I told a group a couple of days ago that these charities that pay for hearing restoring operations on infants, these cochlear implants, they can buy 3 cochlear implants at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma for what they can buy 1 at the so-called not-for-profit hospital across town, performed by the same surgeon.
Same device.
So, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the savings is that shocking.
Yeah, and then finally, before I let you go, is this something that's available in all 50 states?
No, I think the Free Market Medical Association had its annual meeting last month, and there were 31 states represented. I think that it'll probably expand to 40 or 42 states by the end of next year. But there are some markets that are so cartelized that it's very, very difficult for a provider to break in. And they're cartelized for a reason. I mean, the big corporate players have paid handsomely to make sure that underdogs can't appear. But I think this is an idea whose time has come. And I think the presence of state governments, counties, and municipalities getting in this game, they really are going to force the hand of the traditional price gougers to enter this space. I think that's really the next phase.
Yeah, I agree. Desperate times are coming. So I want to let the viewers know that they can find out more about the Free Market Medical Association at FMMA.org. Dr. Smith, his surgery center is at surgerycenterok.com. And you also have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/surgerycenterok, where he gives nice, concise 2 to 3 minute updates on what's going on. So I really recommend you check him out there. Dr. Smith, thank you once again for a great interview. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Albert. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And don't forget to visit powerandmarket.com for insightful interviews with the leaders in economics, finance, and investing. Until next time, take care. Hi, I'm Albert Liu, host of the Power and Market Report. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to subscribe to my channel by clicking the button on the top left of the screen. And don't forget, you can also visit us on Facebook and at powerandmarket.com. Thanks again for watching.